Welcome to Capture the World with D. Interviews with companies and individuals to learn more about digitally capturing the built world. Video, drone, 3D tours, pictures, panoramas, and more. And now your host, a social influencer and community activist, D. Johnson.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Capture the World with D. I'm your host, D. Johnson. My guest today is the marketing manager at iGuide. iGuide is a proprietary camera and software platform for capturing and delivering immersive 3D tours and extensive property data. Today we'll be talking about all the new features within iGuide. So without further ado, please help me welcome Chris White. Good morning, Chris. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing all right. You know, summer's coming. I think it's getting closer to Friday, you know.
Such a glass half full guy.
You got to be positive, you know. You got to try, I guess, at least. Thanks for having me. I can't wait to show you a few things that have changed with iGuide because they're very exciting. Two things specifically. The first one, we've had a big visual update in terms of our viewer. I'll give a demo of that. It's pretty neat. And then the second thing is that the real estate sort of landscape has changed a little bit with regards to measurements. So in case you didn't know, iGuide's core competency is in measurement and floor plans. And recently some changes have come about. They're not that recent. It was as of April 1st, but mandatory measurements in certain areas are becoming more important and more popular. And we're seeing that as a trend in general. But anyway, I'll show you some stuff there when we talk about that. But let's do the new viewer first. How does that sound?
Yeah, sounds great.
Okay, cool. I'm going to share my screen. Give me 1 second here. Okay, can you see my screen right now?
I can.
Awesome. Technology works. I love it.
Well, look at that empty room.
Yeah, that was, we had a whole bunch of footage of the iGuide camera being used in different situations. And it gets a little bit samey when it's always in residential houses. So I tried to include some footage of, different spaces. And that's actually a church.
Oh.
It's like, how churches have like a rec room stage kind of thing. So that's what that is. But I just liked it. It was a big open space. So that was kind of neat. So what I'm going to do is go to the gallery and I'm going to load up on iGuide. Let's use this one. There we go. Let me load it up full screen so everybody can see it. There we go. Okay, so the changes that have occurred recently for the iGuide were meant to be ones that make the iGuide a little fresher, a little more exciting, but really a little more immersive. I don't want to oversell it. But the reason I don't want to oversell it is that the iGuide has its thing that it does really, really well. And the goal of this visual refresh, this update, was to retain that, that thing that iGuide does, which I'll show you in a second, but also make it nice without losing that. Do you know what I mean? Because if we change it too much, then it's not an iGuide anymore, I guess. So for those who don't know, an iGuide is a 3D tour that includes 360-degree visuals. So, you can look up and down and left and right and up and down again. But also floor plans at the same time. And so that's a big deal. Every iGuide is going to look like this. It's going to be a floor plan, pretty big, on the side of the screen, and then combined with those visuals. And the reason that's awesome and that's iGuide's thing is that gives you the ability to obviously look at what you want in the images. There's the kitchen. That's pretty cool. Let's zoom in, or I can click on it to kind of, get closer to it, to move around. But then it also gives you the floor plan. And the floor plan is a really valuable tool to have at all times while you're looking at those visuals so that you know where you are in a property. Yeah. It's like having a map.
How all the rooms relate to each other.
Exactly.
And it's accurate.
It is indeed. Yeah, we'll get to that in a second because there's not new measure modes, but there's reconfigured ones that are easier to find. But the floor plan has its value and the visuals have their value, and iGuide's whole thing is that you get them both at the same time, more or less all the time. However, as I mentioned before, people want that sense of immersion, like they're in a property. So there's a new sort of thing you can do. It's not as fancy as I'm making it sound probably, but you can minimize the floor plan and then minimize the top menu bar to basically give you kind of like full screen visuals. The floor plan is still there in the bottom corner and the menu is still there, but they're kind of out of the way. So the goal is to sort of open it up so that people who really enjoy that the visuals can see it, fairly unobstructed. The tools that exist within existing iGuide are all still here. So no functionality has been removed or anything. It's all just a little bit cleaner and slicker. So the floor plan is now on this sort of like semi-transparent background, so you can kind of see behind it. It gives you that sense that it's sort of floating. And then the zoom tools are still here, so you can zoom into specific areas of the floor plan if you want. Kind of cool. And the menu bar that used to be along the entire top of the iGuide, it's still there. It's just shrunk. So the agent branding is still there. All the other things that make iGuide great are still there. And I'll explain that for people who don't really know. So what makes an iGuide awesome, in addition to that core experience of having like a floor plan and visuals at the same time, which people really like, by the way, because it's easy, simple to understand, and valuable. There's also extra information in an iGuide. An iGuide is a content delivery platform. And so that's still here. It just looks slightly fancier. So what I mean by that is, you could include with your iGuide some other information. So you can choose to include photos, and you can choose to include this tab that shows all the square footages.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
This is super useful because having room dimensions means that if you're doing a listing on MLS, if you're a real estate professional, you can just copy and paste them in. You don't have to measure all the rooms yourself, which is great. That's kind of one of those things with floor plans that's kind of under discussed. Like measurements and floor plans are a huge time saver because you don't have to measure a property. It's done for you. But then all the details that you would put into the MLS for listing, they're all just here. You just copy and paste, which is awesome.
I think the thing that makes iGuide stand out from other products is that you have the laser measuring. So the measurements are actually accurate. So that's really
correct.
important when you go to choose the software that you're using. Not all of them are that. Not all. A lot of them are just guessing, right? So you have there's a big distinction there.
Not all floor plans are created equal. Yep. It's very true. The floor plan on the iGuide that you see on screen right here is also accurate. It's not like a stylized representation of a floor plan. You can actually measure on this. So just like in the previous version of the iGuide, there's a measure mode where you can click on the little ruler, and then I hope you guys can see this. It's kind of small, but I can click and drag and I can measure anything I want on this floor plan. So this is like an awesome feature because it allows you to quickly see if things fit in a space. You can measure windows for blinds. You can measure all sorts of things on the floor plan. And as a home buyer, this answers a lot of my questions. So the whole iGuide experience is really designed specifically to empower people with that property information. So, obviously being able to see a space is like important and understanding the size of the space and looking at the different rooms and how they connect. But then there's those little specific questions like, will my dining room table fit, in the dining room, or if this one comes up a lot, if I put a couch here, will I have room for an end table, on the side? Will there be enough space to walk around, that kind of stuff? So those little detailed measurements are something you would typically go to the home to get. You'd have to book like a visit. So with an iGuide, you don't need to do that. So it's also a huge time saver.
So I have a question. So the windows that you see there, are those windows are actually to scale as well and placed correctly? Yeah.
So not only that, so they are placed correctly. So iGuide is created by professional draftspeople, and what they do is they look at the data that's captured from the camera system, the iGuide camera system, and they specifically place the window so that they're as accurate as possible. So you can measure on them on the floor plan, or you could go to something like measure mode 2, and measure mode 2 allows you to basically measure anything on a wall, more or less. So I can measure on the visuals if I want to. I don't even need to measure on the floor plan. And that's useful if you're trying to measure something specific about something on the wall. So measuring on the floor plan, obviously you don't have a lot of details to work with. So being able to measure on the actual images is super handy. That's a little bit more advanced. It's not for everybody, but it is very cool to have that ability. The other cool thing is that just like before, iGuide has tags, and those tags are um, exactly the same, but slightly fancier looking than they were before, which is amazing. So I don't think people really fully appreciate how cool the tags list is. So typically when you're exploring like a virtual tour, you're looking around and you maybe have a floor plan, like with an iGuide, and you click on the floor plan. But the tags list allows you to just basically click on anything. So here's an example of a tag. I can hover my mouse over this little circle or whatever, and it shows me some extra information. So it's either text or a video or a link or whatever. But iGuide has a tag list. So that means that if I go into an iGuide and I make all these tags, you can navigate via the list. Mm-hmm. So it's basically like a big list of things I think are important in a property. So that's just amazing because, typical 3D tours are very unguided. You're just free to go wherever you want. Mm-hmm. And that's cool. That's awesome. You can get the information that you want, but sometimes you want someone to just give you that information. So the tags list is basically that. You could set it up to be, here's all the things you need to see. Look at these. And then when you're done, then you go explore, or vice versa. And I just think that's really super cool and powerful. To give you an example, sometimes people will do video of a space, and they'll have a video showing off a particular feature of the home. So rather than watch that video outside the context of the space, you can put that video in the space. So when you're in the kitchen and you click on the tag for the countertop, it's like a video of the agent talking about the countertop, which is just very cool. I'm going to bring this up because it's come up a lot lately. One of the things that really, it's been updated a little bit, but what really makes iGuide shine is the agent branding. So agent branding is really, really important in a residential real estate sense, not so much elsewhere. But we didn't even realize how important until we made a few changes to it, and people had a lot of comments about it. Positive, negative, it was a bit of both, but that agent branding is amazing, and I'll explain why. So in a general sense, any virtual tour is meant to do sort of a few things, obviously. I'm being vague, but empowering people with property information, yes. But then so they can do what? And the answer to that question is contact someone to make an offer on the house. So that agent branding is that really critical link between someone looking at the property and someone selling the property. Mm-hmm. And it's easy to kind of forget how important that is for someone's business to be connected to their clients. We often the iGuide interface is placed within a listing page, on a listing portal. So that contact information, it's still there. But you shouldn't have to work to find that. So the agent branding is just really cool. It's been updated a little bit to make it a little bit more obviously hierarchical. So the phone number's right at the top. People really like making phone calls, so that's great. And then obviously email, and then all the social links, in addition to the headshots and logos. Branding is a big deal, and I'm quite pleased that it's featured so prominently on every iGuide. I don't think it's ever going to go away, and that's kind of a differentiator for iGuide. So not every tour handles branding well. Some of them do, some of them don't. Some of them don't have it at all. So that's the thing. Some of the great things that are in every iGuide are still here. So we already mentioned room dimensions and total square footages, but every iGuide comes with PDF floor plans. So they're still here. You can still download them. PDF floor plans are our perfect segue into our next topic, because PDF floor plans are a reflection of the, obviously the size of the home, its layout, but also its total square footage. So basically what's happened is that across North America, we'll say, measurement standards have been becoming more and more important. And those measurement standards are sort of kind of known, but sort of relatively unknown. It's a hard thing to describe. It's not that people don't know they're there. It's just that they're not important. So you don't typically care about things that aren't important to you. But I'll give you the two big ones. I can even show you. So in Canada, we have something called RICA RMS, which is the residential measurement standard, and it's used in the western sort of side of Canada. And across the United States, they have, we all have, it's for Canada as well, something called ANSI, ANSI Z765-2021. And a measurement standard, for those who don't know, is basically like a set of rules for how to measure a home. You know, that's the gist of it. And it's a set of rules that everyone sort of agrees on. So you would think that would be really important when you're measuring homes, because if not, you know, super clear, when you measure a home, its value is based partially anyway on its size.
Yeah. In
So, I
some
mean, you have to
cities,
be
it's based, the price is based on the square footage. So it's super important.
New York, and
Yeah.
well, there's different regions, North Carolina or South Carolina, and then obviously Western Canada, it's a big deal. But yeah, square footage is really, really important in some places.
Yeah.
And then in other places, it's not super important, but it's becoming more important. So as of April 1st, here, let me load up the little website here. As of April 1st, Fannie Mae basically mandated that for any remote estimates, ANSI compatible measurements of a property would be required. And that is a big deal, because what that means is that they're saying, hey, you know, you guys need to have the measurements, done according to this particular standard. And so that's the start, right? Mm-hmm. That's the start of a problem that people have, which is, okay, in order to get basically, for a mortgage appraisal, in order to get financing, I need to have ANSI compatible measurements. Mm-hmm. It's a little more complicated than that, but more or less that's the problem. You need measurements to get financing. They have to be compatible with this standard. So here's the super cool thing for someone who works with iGuide. iGuide measurements are literally ANSI compatible. You can even choose, this is a big deal for us too, you can even choose which measurement standard you want. So we have multiple measurement standards to choose from. And if ANSI is important in your area, then you can choose ANSI. If that RECA RMS measurement standard that I mentioned before is important in your area, you could choose that one. They both report square footage a little bit differently. The way that square footage is reported is all kind of detailed in something called, in the documents, but here, I'll show you in a second here. So if I go to our iGuide and I find one that's done with ANSI, basically we have a method of measurement, and that describes the way that you would measure. Actually, I can show you this as well. Here. So this is a PDF that Fannie Mae put out, I think late last year, that kind of details this whole process. And it kind of talks about the various standards for calculating something called GLA. Mm-hmm. And there's different terms for this, but there's sort of like one number for a whole property, if that makes any sense. Like, how big is that property? Oh, it's 3,700 square feet. Okay. So that number is a little bit different for everybody. And some people call it different things. Some people used to call it gross floor area. Mm-hmm. iGuide calls it in some cases exterior area. And under ANSI, Fannie Mae has decided to require something called GLA, which is gross living area. But it really just means, what's the size of the house. So this document that Fannie Mae put out kind of details all the different considerations that you need to make for reporting that square footage. There's a lot of different people who measure properties for property appraisals. There's different companies and big companies, small companies, all sorts of people. And they all measure in slightly different ways. So the idea that Fannie Mae, this is why this is a big deal. I'll just sum it all up. The reason this is a big deal is that Fannie Mae basically said, hey, you guys all need to use this standard when you're measuring. And that's basically like almost a first. Mm-hmm. There are a few other organizations that require ANSI measures. I shouldn't say require, recommend. Like National Association of Realtors recommends that you use ANSI measurements, for example. Anyway, the long and short of it, the benefit of having those ANSI measurements, just to connect all the dots, is that during the listing process, a mortgage appraisal may be required. And if that's required, ANSI measurements may be required. Mm-hmm. And so this will speed up the process of closing on a property. Yeah. Right? In order to get financing, you need a mortgage appraisal, or you need a property appraisal. And in order to do that, you need ANSI compatible measurements. So if you have them with an iGuide right from the get-go, you're good. You don't have to worry. Yep. The real downside I can see for not ANSI compatible measurements is that you may have, acquired floor plans from some third party or some company. I won't name any names, it doesn't matter, just whoever doesn't provide ANSI compatible measurements. And then you may find out that what you paid for is not as useful as you thought, because during that mortgage appraisal or that property appraisal process, you can't use those floor plans and those square footage totals. So that would be a real shame if you spent a lot of money on those and you couldn't use them. So with iGuide, no worries, ANSI compatible. Does that make sense? That was a lot.
It does. No, it does. I think that iGuide stands above a lot of the other solutions for this, because you know that the measurements are accurate, whereas that's super important. And there's a lot of liability associated with that as well, as a real estate agent, as a photographer, right?
Yep, absolutely. So this makes us very happy at iGuide, because obviously we take measurements very seriously, far more seriously than maybe other people who do floor plans professionally. Again, I'm not naming any names, it doesn't matter. Just if you buy floor plans, they often come with a lot of fine print that says, don't use this floor plan for any actual don't actually look at the measurements on there. It's just there to give you a sense of where the rooms are, and that's fine. Actually, floor plans are really good at that, giving you there's the living room, there's the dining room, okay, that kind of makes sense. But that square footage information is really, really important. And the reason this is really great for us is that we obviously, our measurements are very accurate, and then because they use a LiDAR based set of point cloud. And then those measurements are interpreted by professional draftspeople who know what the standards are and work to them. And they're also very good at interpreting the data, which is a very difficult thing. And then when they finally get those floor plans, you can then choose what you want. You can configure them properly, which is great. So, end to end, every part of that chain, every part of that process where the data gets captured and then it finally gets sent is very reliable and consistent and accurate. So just to give you an example, floor plans can come from anywhere. Anyone can draw floor plans. So I used to draw floor plans, but specifically for heating and cooling calculations. And I was terrible at it. I can admit that. I used to measure. I had a trundle wheel. You walking it, and that's super inaccurate. And I had a giant tape measure, and it was all floppy and awful. But what would happen is that I would draw a bunch of boxes, and then I would put my measurements down. And that's a really terrible process when you're talking about capturing, right? And then I would I have terrible penmanship or whatever. So I later I'd be looking at the measurements and I wouldn't know, is that a 7? Is that a 9? Who knows, right? So, I'm kind of guessing. It didn't matter for me because it was for, heating and cooling. So I just needed to calculate the approximate volume of the home. It didn't have to be perfect. But when you look at it like that, okay, so the measurement can be kind of bad. Well, then take it to the next step. When I would take those things and I would interpret them, we'd have to draw them in this special software called Hot 2000, which is funny. And then when you do that, you're interpreting that data. So I'm taking those drawings and I'm translating them, and that's again prone to human error. Okay. And then as far as measurement standards go, there weren't any. We were just guessing. So you were trying to get it as approximate as possible, or as accurate as possible, rather. So every part of that process for an iGuide is amazing, and that's really, really important. I'm not just harping on this, but it's really important. I'm passionate, you can probably tell. Because if you are putting let's suppose I'm a real estate agent, I'm putting my name on the line, or a real estate photographer providing these floor plans. It's very risky to provide bad floor plans. I don't know why it doesn't get people into trouble more often. So I'll give you an example. If I provide floor plans and they're, say, a couple hundred square feet off, doesn't sound like a big deal, right? But those couple hundred square feet mean a lot in a market where houses are selling for $1 million, $2 million, $3 million. And every dollar can be attached to each square foot. So it's really about, having accurate measurements that follow standards. Is really about protecting your brand if you're a real estate professional. Because, your face is on that listing. You're selling that product. So if you misrepresent it with floor plans that aren't accurate, you're the one who's going to be in trouble. And it's also protecting your brand as a business that provides floor plans, for example. There's nothing worse than having an unhappy client. And so inaccurate floor plans can cause that. if any of the listeners right now have ever ordered floor plans, you might have noticed that sometimes they are, maybe not inaccurate size-wise, but inaccurate in the details. So that's really common. So that's something that iGuide doesn't really get credit for, in that, the interior walls and fixtures and everything are placed correctly.
Yep.
And that can often be really frustrating, because if you provide those to your client as, say, a real estate marketer, well, here's your floor plans, and they look at it and they go, oh, that's wrong, can you fix it? You have to go back to the company that made it and ask, hey, can you fix that for me? They go, okay. And then there's a delay, so they can't use those to market the listing until they get fixed.
Yeah, true.
So that's just another bonus. This whole ANSI thing is great, though. We've been talking about this, and I think we even maybe briefly talked about it, like, I think last year in December. We were talking about kind of trends or whatever, predictions. Our prediction, I should say my prediction. that way I'm on the line. My reputation's on the line there. My prediction is that measurement standards are going to become like the norm across North America, because we've seen that happen already. So that the trend is going in that direction. We've seen it in other places in the world. In Europe, for example, it's fairly normal in certain areas to have a house properly measured before you sell it. And it kind of makes a lot of sense, especially in markets that are kind of nuts. You should really, to protect the consumer, to protect the seller as well, knowing the precise details about a property, really help you understand what it is that you are potentially purchasing. So
Sure.
you don't move into a house you think is 3,000 square feet, but it's actually 2,000. So we're seeing that as a trend, and we're just super excited because
well, you need to represent what you're selling accurately.
oh, exactly.
It's the bottom line,
100%.
right? And I think
It's dangerous to do otherwise. Yeah.
Canadians are more fastidious about accurate measurements. I think I think the U.S. is catching up. So it's a good sign, and it's a good trend.
Yeah. My prediction is that, state by state, region by region, people will start picking it up. And we know that because we've seen it in Canada, in the area where I live, Southern Ontario. This was like, I don't know, maybe 5 years ago, but they made a big step. They said, okay, you have to report square footage when you, just a one total number when you list a property. They weren't super fussy about where you got it from. They were just like, you have to do it. And everyone got really concerned. Oh, how are we going to do this? We have to measure properties now. And they started looking for solutions. So iGuide was one of them, obviously. And, people found other solutions. They decided to measure the property themselves. They decided to reach out to other third-party companies, and it started that sort of conversation. And it's very much like when COVID started, everyone, leapt to find a solution for a problem, which was that you couldn't go to physical spaces. So you had to have digital representations of those spaces in order to get your information. Cool. So the expectation was set that this sort of information would be, available. And there's no going back from that. And we can see that at iGuide, where I'm really privileged. I can see a lot of really cool information. We can see that, although there's a little correction in the sense that people are just excited to get out of their houses or whatever, but we're seeing that virtual tour usage just keeps going up. Yeah. They're not going away. it's like the normal now. And then the whole metaverse thing is another that's driving stuff as well. But the same thing happens with measurement. Once you've bought a property that's fully measured, when you go to get your next one, it seems like a bit bonkers that it wouldn't have been measured, and that it's really just like a guess. And there are a lot of different sources of square footage information. So their reliability is being called into question as well, which is obviously also great for us. How much time do we got?
We need to actually end because Zoom is telling me that it's going to kick us off soon. So